We're just putting the live stream on, everybody, so just 1 second. Good evening, everybody. I'm Pat Edwards, Chair of the Planning Committee. Welcome this evening. There is no fire alarm planned for the evening. Should the fire alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closed exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you, straight ahead of me. Please muster at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. This meeting is being minuted, recorded, filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you're seated in the public gallery, it is possible the cameras may capture your image and you are deemed to be consenting to being filmed and your image and sound recordings webcast by being there. I hope everybody's understood that because it's new this month that we're actually filming as well as recording. Westgate Gardens on the riverside are locked, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind that glass door. Are there any apologies, Sarah?
Apologies received from Councillor Mellish, Chair.
And do we have any substitutes?
Councillor Chris Cornell is present for Councillor Mellish, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest by any councillors or officers. Sarah, could you read the general declaration on behalf of all the committee first, please?
Yes, Chair. All or some councillors may have received correspondence from or spoken with applicants, agents, supporters or objectors, and some of the public speakers may also be known to members of the committee due to their work as councillors. Neither circumstance prevents councillors from participating in the meeting. However, any councillor who considers that they do not have an open mind in respect of any item on the agenda should not participate in the meeting when the relevant item is to be discussed.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations from councillors in the room, please? Councillor Cornell, Councillor Prentice, Councillor Bothwell, in that order. Thank you.
Two voluntary declarations, Chair. My wife is a secretary of a body called Kent Tennis, which distributes LTA funding to tennis organisations, but I don't believe has been involved or given money to the applicant in relation to the land on Altira Way. And my family are members of the Polo Farm Sports Club, which is adjacent to site of the Red Walls on Stod Marsh Road.
Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to item 7, I actually called this one in, as the papers make clear. I have spoken with the applicants on a number of occasions, though I don't consider myself predetermined.
Thank you. Councillor Bothwell? I wasn't. Okay. Anybody else? Any declarations? Thank you, everybody. There are 3 public speakers tonight who will be heard immediately after the officer's presentation for each relevant item. Can we go on to minutes of the meeting on the 20th of August? Can we have general assent that they're a true record of the meeting? Thank you. That's confirmed by general assent. And then we move on to item 6, which is application number CA24 00631, land at Altira Park, Herne Bay, pages 11 to 30 on the agenda. Please could I ask Jessica Harrison, the Planning Officer, to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application proposes a health and fitness club at Altira Business Park in Herne Bay. The application site is outlined in red. Here is a CGI aerial view of the proposed scheme. The application site outlined in red, the Altira Business Park, a To the south is the large Sainsbury's, which is located there. And here is a CGI image of the proposed scheme, looking at from an aerial view. The two-storey health club located here centrally to the rear of the site. Tennis courts enclosed within a dome. The paddle courts here, multi-use games court here, and an outdoor swimming pool, spa, and a kids' play area as well. Here are some CGI images of the building. So the applicant is David Lloyd, as indicated on the building there, and one from within the site showing the spa facilities. The application has been referred to the Planning Committee tonight as it represents a departure from the local plan. This is because the site's protected for business uses. As set out in the report, business users have not come forward on the site for quite some time, despite lengthy marketing efforts. Members may also remember that last year an application was referred to the Planning Committee for consideration for a scheme of retail units and a drive-through restaurant. This was subsequently approved last year. This is a material consideration when determining the application. Taking into account the benefits of the proposal, together with the history of the site, I consider the proposal to be an acceptable departure from the local plan, and therefore I recommended approval subject to a legal agreement and safeguarding conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have, is it one speaker? It's one speaker. We have one speaker for this, Andrea McGregor Barber, Lichfields, agent for the applicant David Lloyd. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Andrea McGregor Barber from Lichfields Planning Consultancy. I am representing the applicant, our client, David Lloyd Leisure. David Lloyd Leisure is Europe's leading premium lifestyle operator with 133 clubs in their portfolio. 104 of these are in the UK and Republic of Ireland, and a further 29 are across continental Europe. They have more than 730,000 members and currently employ 8,000 people, including leading experts in fitness, racket sports and swimming. David Lloyd Leisure identified Heron Bay as a target market and have been searching for a suitable site for some time. The site owners, Alterio Park JV, have gained planning consent to deliver a mixed-use development scheme and have already commenced development in part of the site. David Lloyd have been working closely with Alterio Park JV and, subject only to planning permission being granted, will develop a David Lloyd Leisure Club. The site is located within the designated employment area of Alterio Park. However, loss of employment use has previously been accepted by the council as part of its determination of planning application for 2 retail units, a drive-through restaurant and a builder's merchant. Furthermore, planning officers recognise that it's unlikely employment uses will come forward, as the site has had consent for this use since 2003 without implementation. In contrast, David Lloyd Leisure are proposing a tangible investment, creating between 80 to 100 full and part-time jobs. This is a broadly comparable yield to the site being used for B2 general industrial uses, and yields greater employment when compared with any use of land for B8 warehousing and distribution uses. The club is out of centre, but no suitable sites have been identified in the town centre or edge of centre. The leisure impact assessment submitted as part of the application identified there is a lack of health and fitness facilities within Heron Bay, and the planning officers support these findings. David Lloyd looks to develop clubs with good connectivity, including linked travel chips and sustainable transport links, and encourages members to travel by sustainable methods. 2 bus stops are located within a 3-minute walk, providing connections to Canterbury, Greenhill and Heron Bay, and the location has strong cycling and walking networks. The approval is also subject to a contribution to a bus stop, which we have agreed in principle. No statutory consultees have objected to the application and no public responses were received. It is considered that the proposed development is in accordance with the local and national planning policy, and that the investment by David Lloyd will bring additional leisure facilities and jobs to Heron Bay. David Lloyd intends to implement the proposed use as soon as possible and welcomes the recommendation of approval made by your planning officer. We hope that the members will support the proposal this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation, which is to section 101 grants, subject to completion of a legal agreement and safeguarding conditions. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Prentice, thank you. So can I open this up for debate and questions? Who would like to start? Councillor Stockley, Councillor Bothwell, Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I'm delighted that David Lloyd propose to develop this site. I think that it fits very nicely into what is planned for the area, including the large number of new homes. It demonstrates, in my opinion, a confidence in the area which, up to date, has been lacking, to be honest. This is a substantial investment, and I hope that we can move forward and support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Chair. I very much support the uses proposed for this site, and I think in principle it's very good. I just wonder what the impact of the swimming pool, a new swimming pool, will be on the existing Herne Bay swimming pool, and whether that might reduce the financial viability of that pool if people go to this pool instead. But I think so generally I'm in support of the proposed uses. I think health and sport is to be encouraged. I think it fails on environmental grounds. It doesn't seem to address environmental issues at all seriously, bearing in mind that we declared a climate emergency and then a biodiversity emergency last year. This, from what I can see, and maybe the officers can enlighten me otherwise, from what I can see, it doesn't seem to address these issues in any serious way whatsoever. It claims to have a BREEAM rating very good, but BREEAM rating very good is actually not good. It's a misnomer. It's a mediocre rating. It could be excellent or outstanding. They say, I think somewhere, that there are PV, I think the officer's report mentions PV panels, but I can't see PV panels on any of the drawings. So I'm not sure what area they cover. I would very much encourage PV panels, but maybe over the car park, perhaps. An ideal location for PV panels rather than green fields, as is happening elsewhere in the area. There seems to be no attempt to address the active travel policy which is a policy of the council. There are just 20 cycle storage spaces compared with 226 parking spaces, suggesting that the developers are anticipating that most users will arrive by car, and suggesting that they have no real intention to encourage sustainable transport. The biodiversity figures are particularly disappointing. We should be achieving a 10% net gain on all developments, and this particular development, I understand from the figures, suggests nearly a 90% loss in biodiversity. Okay, if there's an intensive use of the site like this with a large building and swimming pools and car parks, etc., it's difficult. But there are ways of achieving biodiversity net gain, such as the whole roof could be green roof with extensive planting, which would increase biodiversity. They could think about growing plants up the walls. They could think of pergolas over certain facilities within the grounds to encourage wildlife, etc. And on the sewage, the foul sewage, I note that Southern Water requested that a condition was put in the approval document relating to the disposal of foul sewage, but that doesn't seem to have been addressed. So I think it's failing on many issues in connection with the environment, bearing in mind that we have real emergencies to deal with. Thank you.
I mean, I can see some answers to one or two of the points that you raise in the report. However, I think it would be good to bring Jessica in and if you could explain. Firstly, I think, you know, we have got this paragraph 56, which has got quite a lot of stuff, as you say, about heat pumps and PV panels. Maybe you can't see them in the pictures, but it says they're on the roof. But I just wondered, Jessica, if you wanted to talk to the wider points that Councillor Bothwell has brought.
Yeah, of course, that's right. The PV panels will be on the building, on the rooftop there. And the local plan policy for the BREEAM standards, they're meeting that policy with the very good standard there. Obviously, that's a minimum, so they can go beyond that and achieve an excellent if that's possible. And we encourage that for every application that comes forward. But as a policy compliant, it's very good. And the application obviously proposes the cycle storage to encourage people to cycle to the gym, and that's in accordance with the adopted policy as well on the cycle storage amounts. The applicant is also proposing cycle paths to the south of the site, which will continue throughout Altira Park. They're also proposing 2 crossing points, which will allow cyclists and pedestrians to cross to that southern side of Altira Park to continue their journey. And they're also proposing a bus stop to be relocated and money towards a shelter to be provided to encourage people to use the bus, as currently there's no bus shelter services. I'm not sure if that was everything.
I think the last point is the Southern Water point. Yeah, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, Southern Water have requested a condition in relation to details of foul sewerage, but that is actually dealt with under building regulations. So that would be caught in the detail later on. Once a building regulations application is submitted, that detail would come through that. It wouldn't be covered under planning, but it would be covered under building regulations. Thank you.
Sorry, there was a point about biodiversity as well. Just to clear that up, that under new legislation, the applicant does have to provide 10%. We have looked at this with the applicant and this can't be done on the site. However, they are working with our open space team to find the most suitable site close to the application site to provide the 10% BNG there. Obviously, the application that was approved last year didn't have to do this as it was not in the legislation at that point, but this application does indeed and will have to provide that 10%.
I think Naomi Smith's next and then David Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I am also concerned about the low number of cycling storage here, 20 cycling on, is it 260 car parking spaces? Which seems, you know, a bit difficult on this. I'd like to see more cycling storage on the site. I'm imagining that this will be not just an attraction for Herne Bay, but for the wider area. And it's very conveniently placed for everybody coming by car just off the Beltinge slip on the Thanet Way. And I should imagine that people from Whitstable, people from Herne and Storey will be attracted to this facility. Blacksall Bridge is a problem and would be good. Currently, KCC are dealing with it by just putting an uneven road sign up rather than dealing with the problem. If there's any sort of drawback there, that would be useful. But I would like to see more cycling storage here because it is actually, you have got good routes through up and around. There's all these cycle paths and footpaths through. And I wondered if we could increase the cycling on the site. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. When this first, come on there, we've got the papers through it. First glance, and I'm appreciative, and it's a positive thing to bring into Herne Bay. It's quite a major infrastructure coming into Herne Bay, which we deserve, or we look forward to taking on board. The only issue that I really have concerns with is similar to what Naomi was saying, that we've got, and I've said this on several applications on these come through, we've got the drive-through coming through, we've got this one coming through. There's a lot of vehicle movement on one very, very small roundabout. And my concern is there's people coming off the slip road from Herne Bay onto that roundabout section and the whole infrastructure of that roundabout. I do urge that we seriously look at I can only assume the roundabout needs to be made smaller. I don't know if that's something that can be put into this application and created some of the 106 money used for that. But I am really surprised, grateful, I suppose, that there hasn't been any accidents on that roundabout yet. But I can see the amount of traffic that's going to be using that junction will become quite serious and quite overloaded. So that is my concern. I brought up several of these applications. I support the infrastructure and the application coming forward, but I do have major concern on how they're going to access that whole thing. There's a lot of traffic going to come into one very small roundabout, and that is my concern. I've mentioned it before, and if I don't mention it now, I won't be doing my job. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
This application will, if approved, will mean the McDonald's can't be built on this site. So it's the same application site as last year. So the retail units and the drive-through restaurant wouldn't be built if this is approved and built. So you wouldn't have both of those traffic movements. With this planning application, there is a reduction in the movements compared to that retail scheme with the drive-through. So there is a betterment, if you like, on the highways impact from this scheme to the approved one. I think that's everything.
Thank you. Councillor Cornell.
Yes, generally I'm very supportive of the pragmatic approach from planning on a potentially really interesting and important development for Herne Bay. The speaker kind of reminded me the original planning consent for the Altira was back in 2004. Gosh, let's see. The building out of Altira, I think, over the last kind of 20 years, we all appreciate has been problematic. There's been, it's a great intention to effectively use that as a corridor, and I think benefits the whole coast. I think thus we also have to consider what this application would be, would it not be brought forward, which is effectively, it would be an industrial site or a site which could be used for industrial use, which would not receive any kind of a decent biodiversity, where effectively we just stick a kind of small light industrial unit on it, and at the moment is not being used. I think the pragmatic approach, which is to say that we've tried to market this site unsuccessfully, and that this is a good way of bringing good employment to the area, is something I'd kind of concur. And I think picking up on Councillor Bothwell's comment that I think the price point of David Lloyd, as they say in their application, I think would be distinct from the offer that we'd have in other active life centres. But I guess I have two questions and then two suggestions. My two questions are just seeking to clarify. Am I right in thinking that the attenuation ponds, which are on the site but outside of the red marked area, are to do with surface water on the site, or are they to do with surface water off the associated highway? And then is there any indication as to the extent to which the applicant thinks that the air bubble or the bubble will be inflated for the year? Because it's important to say it's the highest point of the site, but they're not traditionally they're temporary structures. And then my two questions would be whether we would be interested in additional safeguards, one of which relates to the biodiversity net gain, because I do think it's right that it suggests here that they have plans to get to 8.25, and they're looking at additional off-site credits which would take them past the 10% threshold. Obviously, it's a legally binding agreement, but I prefer a safeguard which effectively says that we think we should have that agreement in place and agreed with our open spaces team in order that we can have confidence that that is achieved. And then secondly, just to kind of pick up on Stevie's issue, whilst I appreciate that the condition which Southern Water will be covered by building control, how much damage is there in putting in a planning consent or safeguard anyway? It strikes me it relates to the sequencing of something. It suggests that development shouldn't happen until that agreement is in place, rather than building control, which might be a retrospective. I think we're both getting to it in terms of the same direction. We both appreciate that there should be a safeguard, but it strikes me strange that Southern Water would suggest something which effectively is not able to be, attached as a rider to a planning application.
Yeah, thank you.
Would you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The government guidance is that we shouldn't be doubling up on conditions that are dealt with through separate legislation to the planning consideration. So we don't need to add a condition for BNG because they absolutely have to meet that 10% before they commence with development. So we don't need to double up on conditions that are dealt with through separate legislation. My understanding is the dome will be up all year round. I think that's what it says in the planning documents. Yeah, and the drainage, the whole business park is served by the attenuation. Yeah, so everything, all the units already and new developments are served by that surface water drainage that's set up.
Right, I think it's Councillor Stockley next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. To pick up Naomi's point about Blacksole Bridge, I understand it Kent are not to blame on this instant. It's Network Rail's bridge, and they're being somewhat recalcitrant on fixing the holes. The other point being that I have had one email from a resident who was concerned about the amount of light that may be issuing from this site, and also the height of the building. And obviously the building is whatever the building height is, but and it's in an industrial area, but this is because it is not very close to residential, but it does back onto with a railway between. So I wonder if there's any idea on whether the pitches shown will be floodlit, or is there any reason why we couldn't put light mitigation notices in if required. Thank you.
I think I'll go back to the planning officer again. Do we think we need either mitigation, or do we know how much, basically, I suppose it's excessive light might be generated? Because I can just remember us having a massive discussion about this when it was the Polo Farm extension. So I am aware that we might need to think about it, but maybe not in this case, but I'm just checking.
Yeah, the applicant submitted an external lighting report and plan demonstrating that the light spillage from the site's not significant. It will be contained within the site boundaries. The benefit of having the dome and the paddle court building is that the lights are obviously inside those elements. The car parking light is very minimal, and the multi-use courts will be lit. I think it's 4 lights on each corner, but the lighting plan shows that this will not be significant. There'll be downward facing lights, and the light spillage will not extend significantly. So the second point on the size of the building, it's 2 stories in scale, which is in keeping with the units in the area. And obviously, as mentioned, it backs onto a railway line, a significant distance from neighbouring properties. So I've got no concerns with the size of the building or the other structures on the site.
Thank you. So I think it's Councillor Auld next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just have some clarification about the McDonald's application then? Is that application going to be withdrawn if this one supersedes it? I know that when we talked about the McDonald's application, there was some concern about the traffic that would be attracted to that and people using the Sainsbury's car park late at night. And there was concern about that. Presumably, if this application goes ahead, then that might provide some mitigation to that nuisance and that problem. Thank you.
I think we've been assured that that isn't going ahead, but I don't know if there's any more detail. Thank you.
So the application granted last year with the retail units and the drive-through restaurant, that has approval, so it can be built. My understanding is it's not viable to build that, which is why this application has now come forward. If this application was granted tonight, the developer could build one of the schemes, but obviously not both. The builder's merchant that was approved could still be built, as that's land outside of this application site, but certainly the drive-through restaurant and the retail units wouldn't be able to be built if this gym is built. But obviously it's still approved, so it can't be withdrawn. They will choose, but it's my understanding that they're not going forward with the approved scheme for the retail and drive-through McDonald's.
I think that as far as I'm aware, we've answered most points. Are there any outstanding ones? I mean, I gather that on the numbers of cycle paths, they meet the requirement, cycle bays, they meet the requirement. So we're not in a position to enforce any more. I mean, it doesn't sound good, I admit. There are not many, but apparently that's the situation. I think everything else we have had an answer. Are there any other questions? Because if not, then I would like to put this to the vote. I propose that it's section 101 grant, subject to completion of a legal agreement and safeguarding conditions. Have I still got a seconder? Thank you, Paul Prentice. Seconding. So Sarah, could we run the vote, please? Thank you. What happened there? That's carried with one against and one person abstaining. Thank you, everybody. So let's move on to the next item, 7. So application number 7, or item number 7, is application number CA24 01022. It's Red Wall, Stodmarsh Road, Canterbury, pages 31 to 38 of your pack. Please could I ask the Planning Officer, Kelly Tonkin, to introduce the report. Thank you, Kelly.
Good evening, Member. Good evening, Chair. This application is for the change of use of a residential care home to 4 dwellings, along with some external alterations to the building. The application site here is outlined in red. The local plan seeks to steer residential development to the 3 main urban areas, which is Canterbury, Whitstable and Herne Bay. This application site is located outside of the urban area of Canterbury and is also outside of the settlement of Fordwich, which is to the north of the application site. As such, the application is not supported in principle due to its location within the open countryside. Here is the proposed block plan of the site. The application site is located away from services and facilities in Canterbury and Fordwich. Stodmarsh Road does not have sufficient pavements and lighting and away from public transport links, and as such the site is not considered to be sustainable for future residential development. The proposed block plan here shows that how the site will be subdivided into 4 dwellings along with the parking area to the front. The external alterations are limited to cladding and some roof lights. These are considered to be acceptable in visual terms. For context, here is a photo of the application site, which was a former care home. As set out in the officer's report, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
We have two speakers for this item. Rebecca Richards, who is a supporter. Would you like to come forward? Thank you, Rebecca. You have 3 minutes. You can start while we're waiting for the timer to come up. You can start.
Hello, I'm Becky Richards, Deputy Chief Executive and Director of Care for Stroke Park Foundation, which is a charity for people with disabilities. Thank you for providing the opportunity for us to speak in support of this application. Stroke Park runs numerous care homes, care services for people with complex disabilities, including six residential care homes regulated by the Care Quality Commission. Every one of these services has a rating of good, and every one of these services has a top 5-star environmental health rating. Overall, we support more than 150 people with very complex disabilities and employ almost 400 local staff members. After 80 years of providing this incredible service to some of Kent's most vulnerable citizens, the charity is currently facing a major challenge that puts these services and the existence of the charity in its current form in jeopardy. I'm pretty sure that it won't be a surprise to you when I tell you this challenge relates to money and specifically right now to cash flow. Hence the reason we need to sell Red Walls. Hence the reason we need to receive planning permission, which will be a prerequisite for any realistic sale. To put that into context, until 2005, Red Walls building was a normal 5-bed residential dwelling. It was purchased by charity Kent Kids, which obtained planning permission and registered as a care home for 6 people. In 2011, Kent Kids was on the verge of bankruptcy. Stroke Park Foundation stepped in to rescue it, and that included Red Walls and its sister site Footprints. Since then, we've subsidised Red Walls, but this is no longer possible. Red Walls does not meet the requirements for care homes because it doesn't have ensuite bathrooms, and in the cost of improving the fire safety and detection systems, and its kind of post-Grenfell disaster standards is prohibitive. I'm not an expert in planning. Care and disability is our field, but it seems to us that the application does comply with planning requirements. However, if there was any element of doubt, I believe that the National Planning Policy Framework encourages planning authorities to take into account the wider health and social well-being of local communities, and that the local plan allows flexibility to take into account wider social implications. In this context, approving the application will go a long way to ensuring that Stroke Park survives and can continue to employ more than 400 local people and essential services for more than 150 of Kent's most vulnerable citizens that rely on the services we provide. Stroke Park Foundation is currently the Lord Mayor of Canterbury's Charity of the Year, and Canterbury City Council has always promoted the interests of people with disabilities. And we and they are immensely appreciative of this support. We know and you know that this is not just about bricks and mortar, it's about looking after people, including some of Kent's most vulnerable citizens. And in this context, we ask you to support this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The second speaker is Peter Hunt, applicant and agent, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of Fernfield Homes, the applicant. We are a small local developer with a passion for delivering high-quality homes in Canterbury and the surrounding towns and villages. Our proposal is to repurpose the C2 Red Walls care facility into 4 modest residential dwellings. It's worth highlighting that Red Walls was already a dwelling before it was converted into a care home back in 2006. The Stroke Park Foundation has recently vacated Red Walls as the building is no longer viable as a care facility. Consequently, the building now stands unoccupied. Without conversion, the unoccupied structure will inevitably deteriorate and become a magnet for antisocial behaviour such as vandalism and fly tipping. The proposed development is a thoughtful conversion entirely within the building's existing footprint. There is no greater impact on the wider landscape. In fact, it's clearly an improvement both visually and environmentally. Although the planning officer is unable to support the application on sustainability grounds, they have highlighted the following positive points in their report. The scheme does not have a harmful impact on the neighbouring residents. The scheme exceeds government internal space standards, provides sufficient external amenity space, can easily accommodate refuse and cycle storage, provides plentiful parking for residents and visitors. Furthermore, the report confirms that the proposal does not have a harmful impact on the Stobmarsh Nature Reserve. There have been no objections from local residents. Indeed, the immediate neighbours are supportive. Stobmarsh Road and the wider road network can accommodate traffic movements. There are no objections from KCC Highways, which is no surprise as the proposal will result in significant reduction in traffic movements. You can see from the photo how busy the care facility was. The officer's report states that the application is contrary to policy SP1, Sustainable Development. However, I'd like to remind members that immediately next door and on the same plot, 2 new residential dwellings were approved by committee in 2020, with unanimous 13-0 vote in favour, noting that the development in this exact location was an acceptable departure from policy. The NPPF defines sustainable development as having 3 overarching objectives, namely economic, social and environmental. In supporting this application, the committee are securing critical funds for the Stroh Park Foundation. These funds are vital to prevent the loss of 400 local jobs and the displacement of over 150 vulnerable residents. In that context, it's clear that this proposal meets the economic and social sustainability objectives set out within the NPPF, and as such, we and everyone at Stroh Park will be grateful for the committee's crucial support this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am going to suggest that we debate this application. We've got a matter of principle, and there's no doubt that the officer is quite correct in saying that this development does fall in the face of our particular policy on that area. However, Stodmarsh Road is a ribbon development. There are a couple of roads that go off that with quite a number of houses in it, so it isn't isolated. And you've heard what everybody else has got to say. So I think the best thing for us to do is to discuss this for a little while and get the feeling of what our views are. David Thomas.
Sorry, Chair, I just need to declare an interest. I didn't realise this was Stroh Park's application. I do have a niece that works for the Stroh Park Foundation. I'm purely biased. I've got no influence or anything like that. Just declaring an interest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the declaration. That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Prentice, Councillor Jones. Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. I should declare also that I've done voluntary work for Stroh Park relatively recently, for which there's no financial gain to me whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. And just to declare that Stroh Park Foundation is in my ward. I represent Herdon Broomfield. Thank you.
Thank you. On the principle, could we have some views, please? Sorry, I'm not quite sure who was first. Councillor Castle and then Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. I was a bit torn with this one. Obviously, it's on the border of my ward. It's a rural settlement. And I'll be honest, I find it difficult because I was surprised that it was rejected. Although it is a departure, I thought that there's other properties that have been approved in the past, so I thought that would be the way it might go. I'm a little bit adverse to say I want more homes, but I do think it's in the same footprint, it's the same building. It's not 7 new properties on the plot, or potentially any more. So at the moment, I'd like to hear other councillors' views, really, because I was sort of writing a list of sort of things, and I just think it's a difficult one. The officer's done a very thorough job, but it does concern me that these little developments are quite a good way forward. In my rural ward, we've turned them down for many years, and now some are starting to creep through, and most residents are on board with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, we must recognise that this building exists. It exists. It's not a new building. Councillor Prentice, is it? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I am, as I said, not predetermined on this application, although I do remain neutral on it. At the moment, I'm very interested to hear what other members of the committee have got to say about it. I'm concerned. I'm not against the principle of conversion into bungalows. The only thing I am really concerned about is the context in which it sits. As I'm a ward councillor for the area, for Barton Ward, literally it's right at the very edge, very close to the border with Councillor Castle's ward, and actually very close to Councillor Mackenzie's ward as well. I'm concerned about the context because it is car dependent, and as you will know, Chair, also as a councillor for the ward, there are no footpaths along Stodmarsh Road. As our officer has rightly said, there is no decent lighting. And when you walk down Stodmarsh Road, as we do want people to be able to do safely, there is no real safe haven from speeding traffic at 60 miles an hour. That's my biggest concern about it. As I say, it's not about the it's not about the conversion itself, which I can see looks sensitive, it looks tasteful, and I've seen the existing building as well, the one that was approved in 2020 when I went on a site visit a month or two back. So I do have that concern around safety, and I can see that KCC didn't raise an objection, but in an ideal world, we would want a footpath all the way along Stodmarsh Road. But of course, this is a more rural setting. It is a different sort of development. As you say, it's a ribbon development. But I just want to sort of feed back some things that we have heard in the area from local residents. Cars do sort of hurtle along there, and pedestrians are forced to walk in the road. And I'm not saying that's that's not something that the applicant wants people to do. But of course, there is no mitigation. There's no proposal at the moment to install a footpath. Residents want a lower speed limit along Stodmarsh Road. I think that might be something that this application on its own would struggle to achieve as a result of getting it passed, and it just doesn't feel particularly safe, and of course there is no bus service along there. I think that might be stretching it a bit. The residents who live along Stodmarsh Road at the moment, I think, probably are quite car dependent, but this development will inevitably be car dependent, just like every other dwelling along that road. There are large houses with often more than one, possibly 2 or 3 cars. We're just continuing to engender a car dependent culture. Having said that, that seems to be the way that a lot of these other houses and bungalows along the road exist anyway. But I do accept it is a departure from the local plan. And I'm quite interested in hearing what other members have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I think for me it's a difficult one. I mean, it's about fairness when we've turned down other schemes that are quite similar within the district. I know in Seasalter Ward, I've had 2 or 3 turned down where there is actually footpaths on ribbon development sites, where it's been infill into large gardens, adding extra homes within large gardens, recommended by KCC as well. And I just feel torn about that. And for me, it is about, this is a dark road without footpaths. It's something that I am constantly campaigning on in Seasalt, where I've got park homes that have got no footpaths with no access to shops. And for us to be making it happen just feels the wrong thing to do. But I also understand that this building's here. It's a real quandary. I am really torn on this, I'm afraid.
Councillor Cornell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, other members of the committee. At the moment, my personal opinion is I'm minded to agree with the officers. I think it is difficult, and it's not necessarily about the council's support for voluntary sector organisations or the idea. I think actually the site and the design of the site is quite sympathetic. I think I would consider that the applicant is right in how it will probably actually reduce car parking uses, but we wouldn't traditionally put homes there because of the lack of pedestrian access along the road. It is quite dangerous. I think the arguments that effectively it used to be a commercial, a residential development before. Obviously, at that point, it received consideration under the change of use legislation, which existed at that point, in exactly the same way that we have to consider it under the change of use application, which exists at this. And whilst I understand the financial situation Stroh Park have found themselves in, I've also dealt with applications from, you know, young families who have ploughed their life savings into a property, expecting in a rural area that they can change the application in terms of change of use, and we've rejected it. Or we've told them very clearly that you have to advertise it for a full year to prove that that change of use is unnecessary, and they've taken a very substantive financial hit on it, and that was their own personal choice. But the condition, which is to say that we accept change of use in rural areas when there is clear evidence that it can't be used for the existing purpose, I think is important. Particularly, whilst I appreciate that Stroh Park might have difficulties running this financially, where also we have care home requirements across the district, and we have agreed applications in rural areas for care homes which lose us green space. I think that giving it the fair run of the year to effectively see whether it could be used for alternative purposes would make me personally considerably more confident at that point to vote for a change of use. But at the moment, I think the principle of fairness is an important one for me.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, I suppose. Was this built as a care home, or was it residential then converted into a care home? I think I know where this site is, right on the corner.
It was a large residential property. I think it had 5 bedrooms. It was converted to be a care home, and now we're proposing 4 small dwellings.
So, carrying on from Councillor Cornell, we've gone from a use of a property, of a dwelling. So in some respects, if it's never a care home, it could be one major dwelling, I suppose. Now we're going to convert it into 5 or 4, or whatever it is. Sorry. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, there are other uses. It could be used as a children's home. It could be used as a children's school, a small school, or whatever. I know private schools run it. There's one in Herne Bay that's a private school for children in care. So there are other options that maybe it is marketed that could be used for that scenario. Yeah, to cut it up and divide it up seems a bit, I don't know if it's good or bad. I'm kind of on the fence on this one, so take the guidance of everybody else. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think it's Councillor Stockley then. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I quite agree with Councillor Cornell. I think this isn't a reflection in any way on Canterbury City Council's support for Stroh Park, or indeed the good work that Stroh Park does. But I am minded to support the officer recommendation for the reasons set out in the report. We do need to have a framework, and if we're going to ignore the framework because of the many pressures that are brought to bear by charities that need funding, etc. Just bear in mind that this isn't going to be used by Stroh Park. This is a sale, prospective sale for another development, which would then obviously pay Stroh Park a substantial amount of money, I imagine. Irrelevant in planning terms, but it's still part of a ribbon development. We have the local plan. After working on the local plan, if we're not going to stick to it, what's the point? That's my view. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it is a difficult one. Very difficult listening to all our colleagues speaking about it tonight. When you look at the officer's report, or a good report, I have to say, and the recommendation, it's very difficult to actually come away from that, what is, you know, the actual facts of it. I mean, if you read all the paragraphs from, was it paragraph 12 literally to paragraph 23, there you would think that the whole scheme, it was in favour of actually doing it, but the fundamental sticking point is the one what we're all discussing. And as Councillor Stockley's just said there, you know, we have a plan. You know, it's very difficult. I could sit here and argue there's other houses in the road. I could, you know, and do all those things, and they're already there. It used to be a house before, it was a care home. There's probably more traffic what ran as a care home than it would do maybe now. But the recommendation, you know, what the officer's given, I think, although, like I say, it's a difficult decision, is the correct one. Thank you.
Councillor Old.
As you said, thank you, Chair. As you said, this building exists, and any of the other proposed change of use are going to result in the same problems of there being no footpaths, no lighting, it being a dangerous and busy road, and that's going to be even more important if it was a school or any other of the uses that are being suggested tonight. And for those reasons, I'm minded to disregard the officer's recommendation and to suggest this should go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's Dan Smith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, I think many people have said it's a difficult one. I'm of a similar mindset to Councillor Old, in that whatever we change it to, this property is there. I mean, if we were debating, it's a hypothetical scenario, but if we were debating returning it to a five-bedroom house and that was its original purpose, again, it would be an odd situation. To four properties, slightly different, but Councillor Prentice's point about the difficulties of the roads, the footpaths, I agree that it's where would the traffic movements be as well, because with your households they're slightly different to the care home. You're going to get people going shopping, going to the pub and so on. The nearest pub's down Moat Lane, which is quite a dangerous little road to go down and very speedy. I suggest that the nearest supermarkets would be sort of Waitrose or Asda's, Morrison's on the Surrey Road. So you're going to go into difficult areas of traffic movements there. So on the traffic balance, it's very hard to see how you could approve it. But back to Councillor Old's position, it's four properties on an existing property. It's not increasing the footprint. It's not going away as a building. It will be a problem if it stood there. I think one of the speakers said it's likely to deteriorate if it stands there empty. All of these are going to be problems with which we would potentially need to deal with in the future. So I think these are all things to consider, and I personally am slightly, very slightly, on the side of Councillor Old here. I think I'm minded to support this one and go against the officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. As many of my colleagues here have said, this is a very difficult decision, and I am torn myself. I mean, the point has been made multiple times now that, you know, the building already exists, and we should be clear about what that means. It means that even though 4 dwellings is a drop in the ocean compared to what we need, 4 is still more than none, and this would mean 4 more dwellings without any loss of agricultural land or green space. But there have been some really serious points raised about the road safety, and my ward is directly next to this one. It's actually right on the border, I believe, and I get complaints from time to time about road safety on Stodmarsh Road and around Moat Lane as it is. And to have 4 new dwellings on a road where there is no footpath, where it is dark and dangerous, it doesn't seem ideal at all. And this is where, I don't know, we all need to think really seriously, I think.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor Buckman.
Yeah, after hearing everything, you know, I understand what some of the councillors are saying about the road is still going to be there. It's still going to be a fast road, and the buildings are going to be derelict after a while. And there are other sites on that road as well that are going to be in the same situation. But then, as Councillor Stockley said as well, you know, we've got this, and others have said, you know, we have got this framework that we need to adhere to sometimes. So it's difficult. It's a difficult situation. You know, it is only 4 houses. The road is still going to be there. I mean, it's a fast road. It doesn't necessarily mean people are always going to drive fast. I mean, they might not have cars. They might all ride bikes. But it is important to stick to some sort of framework. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere. So I am minded to go with the officer's recommendation on this one, purely because of the framework, not for any other reason, really. As I say,
Thank you.
Nothing's going to change.
Thank you. Councillor Cornell, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, I think the key distinction for me is this is an application for both a change of use and for the buildings. I think, to be honest, the problem we have is, as you've reflected, Chair, the building exists. The problem that we have as a group of people is imagining what it might be in the future. Now, the plan that we have helps get over that fear that we can't see into the future by saying, well, you put something on the market for a year, you see what somebody else might make of it. You know, it says, for example, well, somebody could take this and run it as a training centre. St John's Ambulance have ironically just opened a space. They could have taken this site and run it as a training centre under exactly the change of use. Might not have brought any more roads to it. Definitely wouldn't have put people who would then had to walk along the road. It's really difficult to predict what the future is, which is why the legislation's built it out in the way that it is, which is, to a certain extent, to let the market decide, to give us the breathing space that we need to see what somebody else can use of a space. And then when that is not used, or what change of use is necessarily, to allow people to bring an application forward. And that's, for me, why I'm still minded to agree with the officer recommendation.
I feel that very good points have been made on both sides, really. My own perspective on Councillor Cornell's point is that I really can't imagine very many businesses wanting to be stuck out on that part of Stobmarsh Road. It is a residential road. There are quite a lot of houses along it. This wouldn't be by any means an isolated house in that sense. It's on a ribbon development. And so I feel that this could be a useful use of it. And that's, I think, is the balance. So I would like to propose that we grant this application, and I suppose with normal safeguarding conditions, what would I say? Delegate that to officers. Yeah, so we would delegate any conditions to officers to work out, and we'll just test what the committee feels overall. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Auld, thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Just asking what grounds you've got to refuse to overturn the officer's recommendation, please, Chair. Because I've been thinking of one and I can't come up with any. Thank you.
So the reason that I think that, I think this is hung in the balance. I think that's what everybody's said. We've got, in paragraph 5, we've got a departure from SP4 of the local plan already for 2 houses. This development already exists. It would be a good use of it. Rather than it deteriorate. And I'm not, with all due respect, persuaded that there will be a clamouring of businesses or playgroups or schools wanting to purchase it on that particular location. Just you know, I know the location well. That's just my opinion. I mean, we are divided on this without a doubt. So I just thought I would test this and see whether what the committee feels overall. I think it's in the balance, and the balance for me is tipped that way. If you look at I think Councillor Jones said it, if you look at the majority of the paragraphs in this report, it actually is positive about this development. It's not negative, but we have a principle, and it's whether or not this can be an acceptable, acceptable departure from that principle. And for me, it's about using that property rather than letting it deteriorate. And it's a residential road. So I'll put that to the vote then. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Stockley, do you want to come
Sorry,
in?
just to clarify, Chair. So a vote for would be a vote to approve.
A vote for would be a vote to approve.
Thank you.
And it's opposite to the officer's recommendation. Thank you. So that is carried by 7 votes to 6, everybody. Thank you very much. It was a difficult one, very difficult, as was reflected in the vote, but it was carried. Thank you. I'm putting my microphone off as I'm just about to talk again. So we move on to the next application. Should we just give people just a moment to leave? Thank you, everybody. We go on to application 8, Andrew. This is CA 2300157, land rear of 20 Biffrons Road, Beaksbourne.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members.
Sorry, Andy. I've already said your name and I should have come back to you. Andrew Gamble, Planning Officer, will introduce the report.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just wait for it to come on the screen. Good evening, members. This is an application for a detached dwelling at the rear of 20 Biffrons Road in Patricksbourne. What you can see is the site outlined in red, with the proposal to be sat behind their front in Cranmer Close. So number 7, where my cursor is, and this property here to the rear of number 24, their previous approvals, kind of behind existing dwellings fronting Biffrons Road. What you can see here is the plot of the layout. So you've got the blue dwelling, you've got the yellow area for the parking, you've got the green for the rear garden area. Here you've got the appearance of the dwelling. So you've got that kind of white cladding at first floor with brick and clay tiles on the roof. Here you've got the site itself. So the site I've arrowed in this location here. You can see there's a property here in the corner, so 8 Cranmer Close, and not without dwelling on it, the next application that I'll be presenting is in this location here. So in terms of actually the location for a dwelling, the suitability of a dwelling in this location, there have been appeals in the immediate area whereby inspectors have considered that the location is acceptable and suitable for new dwellings. And on that basis and for the reasons set out in the report, the application is recommended for grant. Thank you.
Thank you. I would propose that we go along with the officer's recommendation and we grant subject to safeguarding conditions. Do I have a seconder?
Second. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any comments? Councillor Stockley, Councillor Castle and Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Chair. Can I take it from Andrew's comments that the developments that are in the rear gardens of the other properties were refused and then were found to be acceptable by the planning inspector?
No, so the dwellings that I referred to in the presentation, they were, I think one of them was granted in 2005 and another one slightly earlier. What's happened is that essentially where you've got Biffrons Road, there have been 2 proposals, so one in 2018 and one in 2021, where they proposed semi-detached properties attached to the existing dwellings in that location. And those two applications, the 18 and the 21, they were refused by officers because of the settlement, because they were in Patricksbourne and there's no services. But actually, when they went to appeal, the inspectors concluded in both instances that actually Patricksbourne itself was a suitable location for housing. And that was driven in part by the proximity of the train station, but also the fact that there's nearby services and dwellings in this location would support the vitality and viability of the rural area.
Other comments? Sorry, I'm not sure. Castle, sorry. It was Lee Castle, thank you.
Thank you,
then
Chair. Sorry. Mine was only a really quick one. This is in my ward, so it's in Little Stradisham, but there's been no objections, there's been no correspondence at all. But one thing that was mentioned to me is that obviously it's a two-storey building. I couldn't see it in there, but I might be going mad about the condition they couldn't then potentially do a loft conversion. That was something that cropped up at the parish meeting. They hadn't put it in writing. But that would be my only concern on both applications, that there could be a condition that they can't then convert the loft, because then they would be overbearing on the residential gardens in the area. But a very minor point. It's not the end of the world, but it's been raised with me after the correspondence closed. Thank you, Chair.
thank you for the comment. Andy, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I can comment. Because of the separation distances involved, it wouldn't be reasonable or necessary to actually impose a condition preventing the roof conversions, for instance, or the addition of a dormer. Yeah, we do it sometimes where there's properties that are in very close proximity, and actually it would result in that overlooking impact. But actually, in this case, it's not the case.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Chair. Just to comment on the design and access statement, there's a very minimal design and access statement with the application documents, and it doesn't mention anything about an energy strategy or biodiversity gain or anything like that, which I would have expected, because previous applications we've considered for housing development, within the design and access statement, there is often quite a lot of detail about the energy strategy and the ambitions for the project, and also no mention of biodiversity gain.
Again, would you like to comment?
Yes, I'll comment. So in terms of the energy strategy, the local plan requires an energy strategy for major developments. And because this is one unit, so minor developments, we wouldn't expect the same level of detail for this as we would for major developments. In terms of the requirement for BNG, this application was actually submitted prior to the BNG being introduced. So there wasn't a mandatory requirement on it for the provision of BNG in this particular case. And because it's currently residential garden, the proposals were considered acceptable because there's a level of maintenance associated obviously with residential gardens already.
Any other comments? Then in that case, I'll go to the vote. So I'm supporting grants subject to safeguarding conditions. I've got a seconder, Naomi, still happy to second. Naomi Smith.
Second.
Thank you very much. And so, Sarah, can we run the vote? Thank you. Thank you. That's passed unanimously. So we move on to the second one on this location. Where am I? 10? No. Sorry. I think sorry. So I'm on application CA 23-01163, 21 Bifference Road, Beaksbourne. Yeah, that's right. It was Land 20. I'm sorry, it's confusing me. They're so similar. Can I ask Andy Gambrell again to introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Wait for it to come up. So this is another application for a detached dwelling next door to the site that now has a resolution to approve. This is the red line here. The other plot that you just looked at was here. Here, following a very similar format to the other one, parking to front, house and garden to rear. Here's the appearance of the dwelling, so slightly larger than the one we've just considered. And this is showing it, again, it's that same photo, but here. So the dwelling would be in this location. And just for context in relation to number 7 Cranmer Close, which is there. So for the reasons set out in the report, and for those discussed previously, the application is recommended for grant, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I propose that we go with this recommendation and grant subject to safeguarding conditions. Do I have a seconder? Paul Prentice, thank you. Thank you very much. Comments, anybody? Then we'll run the vote. Thank you very much. Sarah, could you run the vote on this? And the vote yes is to grant, subject to safeguarding conditions. Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We have got a planning appeals report, which we just need to note. Can I note that report for everybody? And do we have any urgent business to be dealt with in public? No, we don't. Nobody's shouting. And so we've got none advised, and we haven't got any other business under exempt provisions. So the date of the next meeting is the 15th of October, 7 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions. Thank you. Good night.